I hope everything's starting to get in kind of the swing of all of your schooling at home, and I just hope, well, you're doing great. Well, I've got a couple of jokes for you to make it an even better night. Are you ready? These are ones that Ellie and I found. And in case y'all didn't know, Ellie is obsessed with punching holes. So, here's a couple of our jokes. Why does a teddy bear never feel hungry? Because they are always stuffed. Okay. Then, this one you can definitely tell is Ellie's. What did the llama say to the blade of grass? It's been nice gnawing you. And this one, well, Ellie figured it out, but it just works so perfectly for me. Because why do unicorns like my jokes? Because they're unicorny. Do you ever feel like, well, everything's terrible? Nothing's going great? It just couldn't get more awful than it is? Well, I'll admit, I've had those moments. But then I remember that with God, everything is all right. And in his house, everything's all right. Which reminds me of a song. I hope you'll sing out good and loud, and that y'all will do the fun little parts that we've added here and there to the song. Because everything's all right. Ready? Everything's all right in my Father's house, in my Father's house, in my Father's house. Everything's all right in my Father's house. There is joy, joy, joy. But there can be no sin in my Father's house, in my Father's house, in my Father's house. There can be no sin in my Father's house, where there's joy, joy, joy. But the great news is, Jesus is the way to my Father's house, to my Father's house, to my Father's house. Jesus is the way to my Father's house. There is joy, joy, joy. So won't you come and go with me to my Father's house, to my Father's house, to my Father's house. Come and go with me to my Father's house, where there's joy, joy, joy. Where there's joy, peace, and happiness, joy, peace, and happiness, joy, peace, and happiness. Okay, today for our lesson, we're going to keep working on our special fruit of the Spirit. Can you remember what type of fruit it is? If you said grapes, you were right. Now, what's the fruit of the Spirit called? Well, if you were quick enough, then you could have read that it said temperance on it, because temperance is the fruit that we are learning about this month. And temperance is another word for self-control. But through the lessons, we've been learning that we don't want self-control. We want God control. We want God to be in control of everything. Today, we are going to learn about something very important that we need to have self-control, God control in. Well, I've got a couple of clues, and all of these pictures have something in common. All right, my first picture is a computer. Then, I got it upside down. We have a TV. Yes, I know it's a little old-fashioned, but it's still a TV. And then we have a book. Ellie colored this one, so I'm thinking it must be something about unicorns or llamacorns or catacorns or something with a horn. What do you think? And then last, we have a newspaper. What is something that a newspaper, a book, a TV, and a computer all have in common? Well, they're all something that you look at with your eyes. You can read a book. You can read the newspaper. You can watch something on TV. Or you can play or read or, wow, there's so many things you can do on a computer. We don't have time to list all the things, so we'll just stick with what we've said. But those are all something that you can see with your eyes. Now, are they bad? No, these aren't bad things, because I love getting on the computer and watching YouTube videos like Sunday school, or I like looking for new recipes like Jell-O popcorn. Okay, I know, never doing that one again. But I like looking at the computer. And then the TV. I really like to watch TV. To sit down and relax and watch a good movie, or a Western like the Artie, or I can watch TV, and when I'm watching it, I can watch church. And then a newspaper. I like looking at our newspaper for Electra because a lot of times I get to see pictures of y'all. And then, this one's probably my favorite, books. I love to read good books. But the thing is, all of those things, they're good. But they can also be bad. It depends, though, on our eyes. What we let ourselves watch, what we let ourselves read. That's when we have to practice God control. When we let bad things in through our eyes, then they might be things that we start thinking about, dwelling on. And we want to make sure that we're dwelling, thinking about things that would make God happy. We don't want those things that we watch and read to be things that make God sad. As a Christian, we need to be careful what we see with our eyes. Now I have this picture. It says, be careful, little eyes. We need to be very careful with what we use our eyes to see. Now, she's reading this scary story. I like mysteries and things, but I do know that there's a lot of them that are wrong, that wouldn't please the Lord. There's a lot of books out there that you shouldn't be reading because they're books that would make God sad. We have to be careful with the things we let our eyes read. This verse right here says, I will set no wicked thing before mine eyes. This is from the Bible. This is one that David wrote. He said, I will set no wicked thing before mine eyes. We have to be careful with what we set our eyes on. When we set our eyes, it's something we're looking at, that we just keep looking. Is it wrong if we accidentally see something? No, because we can't help it. Sometimes we're flipping channels and something bad comes on. Sometimes we're driving down the road and you look out and a billboard has something bad on it. Sometimes you might be walking through a store and see something, but it becomes bad when we don't look away. Make sure when you see something that you know you shouldn't see, that you turn away from it Don't set your eyes on it. Now, if you see something that you go, something's wrong. I think this is something wicked. This is something bad. But you're not for sure. Don't sit there and think about it on your own. Make sure that you show your mom or your dad or another grown-up. Get their help on making sure that you are being careful with your little eyes. Let's be like the psalmist, like David, and decide to look at things that are good, not wicked. Because as a soldier in the army of the Lord, yes sir, we need to be careful with our eyes. Let's practice God control. Let's pray. Dear Lord, I thank you for this lesson on our eyes. It's so easy to see bad things. Everywhere you go, you can see it easy. And we know that those aren't things that you want us to look at. Help us to be careful with our eyes. Help us, Lord, to want to look, to set our eyes on good things, things that are pleasing to you, that would make you happy, not things that would make you sad. Help us to be careful with our little eyes and to use God control continually on the things we see. In your name I pray. Amen. Wow! Last week was extreme. There was so much going on and my heart was pounding because now I'm just trying to figure out how this is all going to come together. Well, we're getting ready to start chapter 15, but let's review just a little bit. All right. Couple of chapters ago, we learned that Artie was, well, Grandpa called him a dog. Or was it Jasper? Let's see. Oh, it was Jasper. He called him a dog. And then Grandpa was trying to convince Jasper that there was a such thing as a bean dog. We were trying to find out with our dog if he was a bean dog, but he doesn't like beans. So that didn't work out very well. So he won't be there to help us make it through life. If we get stranded, I guess. And then Grandpa and Artie, while they were in town, met Marshall Bodie. And while Grandpa was talking to Marshall Bodie, Artie snuck into the marshal's office. And he found a wanted poster, and he figured out exactly why the dead man had two different colors on his face. Right, it was because he had been shaven. He used to have a beard. Well, Artie thought it was Marshall Bodie that had come in, and he was scared, but it was just Jasper. But the marshal wasn't very far behind Jasper. And as they were rushing out the back door, well, the cover came into play now. Artie saw a message with a jackknife stuck in it. Coyote Canyon, midnight. Now, tonight, my special camera helper has been Ellie, and you all know Ellie doesn't have a phone, so she doesn't have a timer, so we get to go with no timer tonight. So I'm going to read all of chapter 15. Are you ready? Grandpa climbed down from the buckboard and went into the house. I drove the team to the front of the cookhouse and stopped. Something like an hour later, I had finished helping Grubby unload the supplies. Then I put the buckboard away, unhitched the team, and fed them some oats. When I walked into the parlor, all three grown-ups stopped talking and looked at me. I wanted to turn around and light a shuck for Mexico. That meant he wanted to run off and head to Mexico. Ma and Grandma both looked scared and worried. It was Grandpa's grin that gave me the courage to walk on in. I sat on the hearth near his chair and waited. I told the women everything, said Grandpa. He must have seen the anger in my eyes, for he held up one hand, the palm toward me. Now, before you lose your temper, hear me out. I've known these two ladies for a long time. I respect their opinions, and I love them too much to go behind their backs any longer. Your ma agrees with you that the marshal is a straight shooter. She also agrees with me that pride sometimes clouds the judgment of even the best men. Grandpa took out his bandana, then took off his spectacles and wiped his face. I waited, knowing he wasn't finished. I quietly watched as he put on his spectacles, folded the bandana, and put it back in his pocket. Then, looking straight at me, he continued. These women agreed that the marshal might need someone to back his play tonight. They also think that I'm a little old to be that someone, and you're a little too young. He held up his hand again when I started to argue. Hold your horses. I'm not finished. I believe that I've managed to persuade them that although they may be right about us separately, together we add up to one pretty good man. Besides, with your ranch hands taking that herd to Dodge City, we're the only men available for the job. Your ma tells me that before Bill left, he said he reckoned nothing would come up that you couldn't handle. You mean we're going to Coyote Canyon tonight? I asked, jumping up from the hearth. Ma and Grandma still looked worried. As soon as we get our gear together, Grandpa said. Then he added, oh, I'm forgetting one thing. What? I asked, feeling the beginning of another knot in my stomach. Son, I haven't asked if you want to go. I let out the breath I've been holding. I reckon we're pards, I said. I couldn't keep back that grin. We were ready to go in an hour, although it only took me 15 minutes to saddle Prince and Sally. Grandpa used that time to gather the things he thought we might need. We spent the next 45 minutes listening to our womenfolk warning us to be careful. Grandpa and I had to promise to stay hidden and not take any chances. Grandpa said we would unless circumstances got out of control. I suspect neither Ma nor Grandma cared much for that assurance, but they were stuck with it. As we left the ranch and headed for Coyote Canyon, my heart was pounding and my throat was drier than usual. Again, I could feel a knot beginning to form in my stomach. Where's the best place for us to be? Asked Grandpa. For what? I asked. Well, there's going to be a full moon tonight. We need a place where we'll be hidden, but able to see as much as possible. Chances are good that we'll watch whatever happens, then go home. If we do need to help the marshal, I need to be where I can do him some good. Grandpa leaned forward and patted the butt of the old Sharps buffalo gun, which he carried across his saddle. Suddenly, my throat was so dry that I couldn't swallow. Grandpa, how will we know where the marshal will be? We won't, boy, he replied in almost a whisper. That's why you need to guess the most likely place to meet someone. You know the canyon far better than I do. I tried to swallow, but my throat was dry. It felt like it was full of sand. What if I'm wrong? I asked. Here's a picture of Grandpa and Artie. Try to pick a place that will let us move around a little, Grandpa answered quietly. Take your time, son. We have a good 4 hours until sundown. I reckon whoever the marshal's meeting won't come until right around then. He'll not want to be seen riding in, but he might need to see where he's going. If he's not in the canyon by sundown, I judge he'll hole up until the moon rises. It should be up before the marshal rides in anyways. We need to hide where we can see the mouth of the canyon. The more we can see of the rest of it, the better. By the time we rode into Coyote Canyon, I'd picked the hiding place. We picketed Prince and Sally out of sight behind some boulders, and I led Grandpa back about 20 yards toward the mouth of the canyon. We climbed 50 feet up a sharp slope to a Mozilla. I don't know if I said that right. A flat spot, though, with boulders scattered around. We call this the tower, I said. We? Asked Grandpa, raising his eyebrows. Me, Jasper, Tom Green, you haven't met him yet, and Esther Travis. I don't recall having met Esther either, said Grandpa, winking at me and smiling. I could feel my cheeks burning as I blushed. She's just a friend, Grandpa. I didn't think she was your wife, he said with a chuckle. He had brought his saddlebags with him. He opened one, took out a telescope, and began to look slowly around the canyon. Then, without looking at me, he finished his sentence. Yet. Grandpa, she's just a friend. I understand, Artie. He was still studying the canyon through the telescope. I know just what you mean. When I was your age, I had a friend, a lot like Esther. I felt better to hear him say so. What was her name, I asked. Oh, let me see now. It was so long ago. He was quiet, still using his telescope. After a minute or so, he said, oh, I remember it was Martha. Martha Strunk. Oh, she was a pretty little thing. Last I heard, she married a good man, had a family, and did quite well for herself. The name Strunk opened one of those little doors in the back of my mind. You're talking about Grandma, aren't you? He put the telescope down and answered, sure am. We climbed down to the horses. They were in the shade, but the canyon was still mighty hot. We had brought 2 extra canteens. Both were twice the size of the one I usually carried. Pouring water from one of them into our hats, we gave Prince and Sally a drink. We got the rest of our gear, food, canteens, and bedrolls, but we left our saddles on the horses. Both of us knew we might need to ride in a hurry. Then we got as comfortable as a person can get when sitting on a rock, and I did one of the hardest things a young cowboy ever has to do. I waited. And guess what? You have to wait till next week to hear chapter 16. Well, it's that time again. Time where we have to say goodbye. And just in case you were wondering, Ellie also says goodbye. So, goodbye.